Hello and welcome to the New World Review, where the villain becomes a nice guy for a bit and we pontificate on the stages of development for a human-insectoid hybrid. Yes, that was a lot of long words because saying the bug is getting emotional feels a bit less, I don't know, deep. And I'm nothing if not as complex as the word pontificate. Let's get into it. Poor Violin Butterfree. All his greatest fears coming to pass and he doesn't even know how to deal with it. The softness we saw coming from Meruem was quite the beautiful thing. There's this harshness and victory in being a strong man, but that's being counterbalanced so sharply by behavior he doesn't even know he's engaging in for the most part. The beautiful moment of softness and the wonderful confusion in his thoughts, maybe I'm imagining it, but the lines used to draw Mary seem to soften and gain a measure of roundness when he's engaging with Komugi on an emotional level, as compared with when he's away from her. And it's one of those wonderful things that show us how we're impacted by those around us, that Violin Butterfree and Mary are both reacting very powerfully to the situation whether they want to or not. Poor Butterboy is scared that his homeboy is fallen for a girl, and homeboy King is starting to question his own existence. It's fascinating that she's injecting this measure of humanity into him by continuously forcing him to think outside the strategic elements of the game they're playing. Because truly, this game is being played on levels now, and Komugi is entirely controlling the board. He's been so strongly shifted out of the realm of power on it that bringing his power back to brute strength is critical to him remembering who he is, or was, or what wants to be, or That said, he made a really important point. There are different forms of power. What he doesn't seem to have realized as yet is that the ability to engage empathy or to shift the emotions of those significantly stronger than you is a huge strength in itself. Emotional people make mistakes. Emotional people get distracted by those emotions. So while Komugi is becoming more strategically minded through her little bubbles of excitement and learning, the others are becoming less strategically minded and more likely to respond to their emotions than to the actual situation at hand. I do wonder whether Komugi is using Nen in some way to sap the ability to think strategically from them, or to heighten emotionality or something, especially as Mary walked into the room entirely intent on killing her and ended up saving her from an eagle, which kind of feels like it should be a reference or a metaphor for something, but maybe not. Did I miss something? The idea that this eagle was there, proud and beautiful in the previous scene and ready to just attack to gain whatever it thought it was gaining, to hurt for the sake of hurting, and that Mary then decided to protect her from that. It sort of makes me think of the old "no one's allowed to hurt you but me" situation that exists between me and my sibling. Without even thinking about it, Mary destroyed the attacker to protect a creature he had been laughing less than a minute before about being able to destroy without a thought. Turns out he needs a thought. Or maybe he'd be better off without the thought. That's kind of the point, really, isn't it? Yeah. The strength of Butterfree's thoughts and concerns are so incredibly valid, and everything he's seeing is absolutely correct. There are very significant concerns with someone who, until very recently, saw humans as cows, who has now found one that seems intelligent. Is that enough to change his entire outlook? Maybe not. What he has realized, though, is that king, like cow, is a title, not a noun. He doesn't have a name that the others know, which means either they don't see the value in him having a name, or killing his mother was a bad idea, which, we'll go with that one, or that he's not a fully functioning creature because that name was not given or provided. There's something important about being given a name, or receiving a name, or choosing one. Will he choose one himself, or will he let Komugi decide? He never cared before about whether he had one. There was no need for anyone to use it because power was all physical. Now he's connecting with someone on an emotional level, and he needs a way to distinguish himself from the title he holds. It's a huge indication of development, but the form of development is incredible because it's an indication that he wants to be more than just the title. He sees benefit in being able to drop, essentially, to Komugi's level, or rise, I guess, to Komugi's level. She's worthy of his time and attention, so she has been granted sentient status. The 3 Royal Guard have managed to survive his decisions thus far, so they get to have names. But they also get names because to call them collectively Royal Guard becomes tedious. And it calls all of them at once, which is, not helpful. Names serve several functions. They allow for communication to become deeper than the communication he's engaged in now. He knows Komugi well, or at least he knows Komugi better than anyone else he knows. And the fact that he doesn't even know his own name says that he knows her probably better than he knows himself. Hence the terror of the current situation. that would be terrifying for most people. He doesn't know himself. So how is he supposed to concretely understand why he's reacting the way he does? It's quite wonderful when you think about it. He was a preemie baby. He was a premature baby, essentially, and now he's catching up to the others in their emotional development. Fulfilling basic needs was the first step, as with human babies. I need food. How do I get it? The next step was to get a sense of importance in the world. Taking over from the previous leader and installing himself in a position of power was sort of like putting a square block in a square hole. Now he's having existentialist problems. So I guess somehow we've gone from childhood to adolescence, but the effect is the same. He's having to deal with emotions he's never had to deal with before and that he was ill-equipped to deal with because of how easily he was given everything else. It's sort of a reproduction of 3 men and a little lady, except they're not all men and he's a super powerful entity, but you get my point. Meanwhile, the other protagonists are still preparing to break in and do things as planned, despite not hearing from Palm, which is very much a concern and should be a concern for all of them. All of them. They are doing a thing that seems ill-advised, given someone who knows the plan and has powers that can just watch them. I don't know. I look at this ragtag bunch of oddballs and think, well, if anyone can do something about this, you probably could. But I feel like what you could do about it probably isn't what you're intending to do about it. Either way, it makes for good story. So let's take a look at episode 109. 109, and Mary's asking, what do I want to do with her? What indeed? Does he want her to be his queen? I think I raised something like this before. The idea that maybe because he values the strength of Komugi's strategic mind, he might elevate her. But it's starting to seem like something more, I don't know, intense than that. And she seems to care just as much about him in a way that I'm not sure how to interpret. The interesting thing about this episode is that I was right in what I said about the first one. As they all prepare to engage in possibly the last moment in their lives, each of the characters get some introspective time. And I love that because it tells us a lot about who they are. The same as when we lost Leol a few episodes back. While the rest of the characters can spend their time preparing for combat in the context of who they are and who they were and what they've learned about themselves over this time, Mary can't do that because he's in his existential phase. Metaphorically, it's great that his introspective moment happened with him away from the game table and away from Komugi because it showed us that his desire to know who he is doesn't come from a need to dominate anyone or to control a situation or for some kind of strategy. It was just a question asked of the stars at night, and who hasn't done that at some point? We all hit a moment where we question what or who we are, and that's often the question that comes before who or what we want to be. We can't become something unless we know what that something is, and it's such a vast distance to travel from the vaguely awful comment about how no one thinks of giving mercy to cows that happened a long time ago now. I remember struggling with that phrase when I heard it because it sounded so like something someone repeats when they hear it, right? I mean, it's not wrong, but it sounded so unoriginal a thought that I wonder whether his composite creatures had heard it before. One of the things that we still haven't had confirmed is whether Mary is actually that kid from ages ago or what the connection there might be. How much of his past life does he remember, given so many ants remember those things? Is he related to Komugi in some way that hasn't been revealed? She can't see, so she can't pick any connection between them visually, and he's touched her, but she hasn't touched him, which I imagine in terms of facial shape and such would be the easiest way for someone visually impaired to sense a difference. Speaking of sensing difference, Colt is safe and well and looking after what I can only assume is the world's first Saiyan while it plays with little toys. We still don't really know anything about that kid, but I find it odd that of all the ants that have grown up very quickly, we also have a baby that seems to be growing at the pace of a baby. I'm very confused and wondering how long that ant was gestated and how or why that's a thing. Was it just a creature to get Colt out of the way? Is it a manifestation of his sister? I have a feeling that's not something I'll get the answer to, but I hope we'll see a full moon and that kid in frame and we'll wonder. All the characters had their moment of introspection in this episode and spent time engaging with their own thoughts. I've said before how much I like this approach to storytelling, and it really doesn't take much to see all the differences between them. We see Nov again, who has been scared pale and thin at this point, and the moment at the end of the first half where we get to see his eyes with those deep bags under them, the emptiness of them is a stark contrast to the sort of neutrality that we saw before. The experience he's had has changed him forever, and yes, we knew that already, but we're now seeing what the other characters have been seeing. Nov represents the best or worst case scenario for them, essentially. Someone who encountered the royal guard and will forever have to deal with the horror, but has survived, at least. Like I say, either the best case or the worst case scenario, and it kind of makes me wonder briefly whether Killwa's had the same experience and whether his hair and eyes were originally closer to Gon's. Yeah, I doubt it, but it's interesting. The more interesting thing is the observation that despite seeming confident, Coward Boy thinks Killwa looks like he's gonna fade away. The thing about that is he's also probably right. Killwa's clearly preparing to sacrifice himself to make sure Gon can get the revenge he wants to get, not considering the idea that if Killwa himself dies, Gon will be even more vengeful. Gon isn't as consistent as any of the others in that room, so he's still the weakest link to my mind, and that's very obvious in the way the others talk about their awareness of how hard things are going to be and their resolve to die for the cause, or awareness that they likely won't make it out. All except, Octobuddy, Ikalgo, who is seeing this whole situation as a rebirth, which is really lovely. We have yet to see what Netero's doing or has been doing this whole time, and I'm holding out for it, but I kind of need him to come back soon because, short attention span. If Togashi's trying to surprise me with a Netero return, I need it soon. Being 10 minutes out from the action, there's a lot going on and a lot of threads to hold on to. And speaking of holding on to threads, I'll leave you with this thought. The expectation that Mary would tell Pito to protect Komugi now exists in the real world rather than just in my mind. How far is Komugi willing to go to protect the person who has been nicest to her? And would Mary use her as a decoy to get into an advantageous position? I doubt it, given his earnest honor, but we don't know. And with those final thoughts playing in my mind and shared to yours, that's it from me. If you enjoyed this tiptoe through the mental tulips, click here, here, and here. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.